Porto, also known as Oporto in English, is the second largest city in Portugal, after Lisbon, and one of the major urban areas in southwestern Europe. The urban area of Porto, which extends beyond the administrative limits of the city, has a population of 1.4 million in an area of 389 square kilometers, making it the second largest urban area in Portugal. Porto metropolitan area, on the other hand, includes an estimated 1.8 million people. It is recognized as a Gamma-level global city by the Globalization and World Cities Study Group, the only Portuguese city besides Lisbon to be recognized as a global city. Located along the Douro River estuary in northern Portugal, Porto is one of the oldest European centers, and its historical core was proclaimed a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1996. The western part of its urban area extends to the coastline of the Atlantic Ocean. Its settlement dates back many centuries, when it was an outpost of the Roman Empire. Its combined Celtic-Latin name of Portus Cale has been referred to as the origin of the name of Portugal, based on transliteration and oral evolution from Latin. In Portuguese, the name of the city is spelled with a definite article. Consequently, its English name evolved from a misinterpretation of the oral pronunciation and referred to as Oporto in modern literature and by many speakers. One of Portugal's internationally famous exports, port wine, is named for Porto, since the metropolitan area, and in particular the caves of Vila Nova de Gaia, were responsible for the packaging, transport and export of the fortified wine. In 2014, Porto was elected the best European destination by the Best European Destinations Agency. History. Early history. The history of Porto dates back to around 300 BC, with Proto-Celtic and Celtic people being the first known inhabitants. Ruins of that period have been discovered in several areas. During the Roman occupation of the Iberian Peninsula, the city developed as an important commercial port, primarily in the trade between Lisbona and Bracara Augusta. Porto fell under the control of the Moors during the invasion of the Iberian Peninsula in 711. In 868, Vamara Perez, a warlord from Galicia, and a vassal of the King of Asturias, Eliacuto and Galicia, Alfonso III, was sent to reconquer and secure the lands from the Moors. This included the area from the Minho to the Douro River. The settlement of Portus Cale and the area that is known as Vila Nova de Gaia, Portus Cale, later referred to as Portugal, was the origin for the modern name of Portugal. In 868, Count Vamara Perez established the County of Portugal, or usually known as Condado Portucalense, after reconquering the region north of Douro. In 1387, Porto was the site of the marriage of John I of Portugal and Philippa of Lancaster, daughter of John of Gaunt. This symbolized a long-standing military alliance between Portugal and England. The Portuguese-English alliance is the world's oldest recorded military alliance, which inspired the formation of NATO. In the 14th and the 15th centuries, Portuguese shipyards contributed to the development of Portuguese shipbuilding. It was also from the port of Porto that, in 1415, Prince Henry the Navigator embarked on the conquest of the Moorish port of Ceuta, in northern Morocco. This expedition by the king and his fleet, which counted among others Prince Henry, was followed by navigation and exploration along the western coast of Africa, initiating the Portuguese Age of Discovery. The nickname given to the people of Porto began in those days. Portuenses are to this day, colloquially, referred to as tripeiros, referring to this period of history, when higher quality cuts of meat were shipped from Porto with their sailors, while off-cuts and byproducts, such as tripe, were left behind for the citizens of Porto. Tripe remains a culturally important dish in modern-day Porto. 18th-century wine, produced in the Douro Valley, was already in the 13th century transported to Porto in barcos Rabelos. In 1703, the Methuen Treaty established the trade relations between Portugal and England. In 1717, a first English trading post was established in Porto. The production of port wine then gradually passed into the hands of a few English firms. To counter this English dominance, Prime Minister Marquis of Pombal established a Portuguese firm receiving the monopoly of the wines from the Douro Valley. He demarcated the region for production of port to ensure the wine's quality. This was the first attempt to control wine quality and production in Europe. The small wine growers revolted against his strict policies on Shrove Tuesday, burning down the buildings of this firm. The revolt was called Revolta dos Borrachos. Between 1732 and 1763, Italian architect Niccolò Nezzoni designed a Baroque church with a tower that became its architectural and visual icon, the Torre dos Clérigos. During the 18th and 19th centuries, the city became an important industrial center and saw its size and population increase. 19th century, the invasion of the Napoleonic troops in Portugal under Marshal Soult also brought war to the city of Porto. On the 29th of March 1809, as the population fled from the advancing French troops and tried to cross the River Douro over the Ponte das Barcas, the bridge collapsed under the weight. This event is still remembered by a plate at the Ponte de Lumastan. The French army was routed out of Porto by Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington, when his Anglo-Portuguese army crossed the Douro River from the Mosteiro da Serra do Pilar in a brilliant daylight coup de main, using wine barges to transport the troops, so outflanking the French army. In the 24th of August 1820, a liberal revolution occurred, quickly spreading without resistance to the rest of the country. In 1822, a liberal constitution was accepted, partly through the efforts of the Liberal Assembly of Porto. When Miguel I of Portugal took the Portuguese throne in 1828, he rejected this constitution and reigned as an absolutist monarch. A civil war was then fought from 1828 to 1834 between those supporting constitutionalism and those opposed to this change. Keen on near-absolutism and led by D. Miguel, Porto rebelled again and had to undergo a siege of 18 months between 1832 and 1833 by the absolutist army. Porto is also called Cidade Invicta, after successfully resisting the Miguelist siege. After the abdication of King Miguel, the liberal constitution was re-established. Known as the City of Bridges, Porto built its first permanent bridge, the Ponte das Barcas, in 1806. 3 years later, it collapsed under the weight of thousands of fugitives from the French invasions during the Peninsular War, causing thousands of deaths. It was replaced by the Ponte de Maria II, popularized under the name Pont Pencil and built between 1841 to 43. Only its supporting pylons have remained. The Ponte de Maria, a railway bridge, was inaugurated on the 4th of November of that same year. It was considered a feat of wrought iron engineering and was designed by Gustave Eiffel, notable for his Parisian tower. The later Pont Dom Louis I replaced the aforementioned Pont Pencil. This last bridge was made by Théophile Seyrig, a former partner of Eiffel. Seyrig won a governmental competition that took place in 1879. Building began in 1881 and the bridge was opened to the public on the 31st of October 1886. A higher learning institution in nautical sciences and a stock exchange were established in the city, but were discontinued later. Unrest by Republicans led to the first revolt against the monarchy in Porto on the 31st of January 1891. This resulted ultimately in the overthrow of the monarchy and proclamation of the Republic by the 5th of October 1910 revolution. 20th century. On the 19th of January 1919, forces favorable to the restoration of the monarchy launched in Porto a counter-revolution known as Monarchy of the North. During this time, Porto was the capital of the restored kingdom, as the movement was contained to the north. The monarchy was deposed less than a month later, and no other monarchist revolution in Portugal happened again. In 1958 and 1960, Portas Street hosted the Formula One Portuguese Grand Prix. The historic centre of Porto was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1996. The World Heritage Site is defined in two concentric zones, the protected area, and within it the classified area. The classified area comprises the medieval borough located inside the 14th century Romanesque wall. Geography. In 1996, UNESCO recognized its historic center as a World Heritage Site. Among the architectural highlights of the city, Porto Cathedral is the oldest surviving structure. Together with the small Romanesque church of Cedo Feita, the Gothic Igreja de São Francisco, the remnants of the city walls, and a few 15th-century houses. The Baroque style is well represented in the city in the elaborate gilt-work interior decoration of the churches of St. Francis and St. Clare, the churches of Mercy and of the Clerics, the Episcopal Palace of Porto, and others. The neoclassicism and romanticism of the 19th and 20th centuries also added interesting monuments to the landscape of the city, like the magnificent Stock Exchange Palace, the Hospital of St. Anthony, the municipality, the buildings in the Liberdade Square and the Avenida dos Aliados, the tile-adorned São Bento train station, and the gardens of the Crystal Palace. A guided visit to the Palácio da Bolsa, and in particular the Arab Room, is a major tourist attraction. Many of the city's oldest houses are at risk of collapsing. The population in Porto municipality dropped by nearly 100,000 since the 1980s. But the number of permanent residents in the outskirts and satellite towns has grown strongly. Porto is ranked number 3 in the Portuguese Most Livable Cities survey of living conditions published yearly by Expresso. Administratively, the municipality is divided into 7 civil parishes: Aldor, Foz do Douro e Nova Guilda, Bonfim, Campana, Cedo Feita, Santo Ildefonso, S.E. Acute, Miragaia, São Nicolau e Vitória, Lourdes do Douro e Massalos, Paranhos, Ramalda. Climate. Porto features mainly a Mediterranean climate. As a result, its climate shares many characteristics with the coastal south: warm, dry summers and mild, rainy winters. Unlike the south, however, cool and rainy North Atlantic interludes interrupt the dry season, and the season's average length is shorter, with 3 dry months. The annual precipitation is high, and Porto is one of the wettest cities of Europe. However, long periods with mild temperatures and sunny days are frequent even during the rainiest months. Summers are typically sunny with average temperatures between 16 degrees Celsius and 27 degrees Celsius, but can rise to as high as 38 degrees Celsius during occasional heat waves. During such heat waves the humidity remains quite low, but nearby forest fires can add haze and ash to the air, making breathing somewhat uncomfortable, especially at night. Nearby beaches are often windy and usually cooler than the urban areas. In contrast, occasional summer rainy periods may last a few days and are characterized by showers and cool temperatures of around 20 degrees Celsius in the afternoon. However, summer average temperatures are a few degrees cooler than those expected in more continentally Mediterranean-influenced metropolises on the same latitude, such as Barcelona and Rome. Winter temperatures typically range between 5 degrees Celsius during morning and 15 degrees Celsius in the afternoon, but rarely drop below 0 degrees Celsius at night. The weather is often rainy for long stretches, although prolonged sunny periods do occur. Economy. As the most important city in the heavily industrialized northwest, many of the largest Portuguese corporations from diverse economic sectors, like Altri, Ambar, Amorim, Bial, Cerealize, BPI, CIN, EFACEC, Frulact, Lactogal, Millennium BCP, Porto Editora, Grupo RA, Sony, Sony Industria, and Unisa, are headquartered in the greater metropolitan metropolitan area of Porto, most notably, in the core municipalities of Maia, Matosinhos, Porto, and Vila Nova de Gaia. The country's biggest exporter has one of its two refineries near the city, in Lecce da Palmeira, and the second biggest has its only factory also near the city in Mindelo. The city's former stock exchange was transformed into the largest derivatives exchange of Portugal, and merged with Lisbon Stock Exchange to create the Bolsa de Valores de Lisboa e Porto, which eventually merged with Euronext. Together with Amsterdam, Brussels, Lille and Paris stock and futures exchanges. The building formerly hosting the stock exchange is currently one of the city's touristic attractions, the Salão Árabe being its major highlight. Porto hosts a popular Portuguese newspaper, Jornal de Notícias. The building where its offices are located was up to recently one of the tallest in the city. Porto Editora, one of the biggest Portuguese publishers, is also in Porto. Its dictionaries are among the most popular references used in the country, and the translations are very popular as well. The economic relations between the city of Porto and the upper Douro River have been documented since the Middle Ages. However, they were greatly deepened in the modern ages. Indeed, sumac, dry fruits and nuts, and the Douro olive oil sustained prosperous exchanges between the region and Porto. From the riverside quays at the river mouth, these products were exported to other markets of the Old and New World. But the greatest lever to interregional trade relations resulted from the commercial dynamics of the port wine agro-industry. It decidedly bolstered the complementary relationship between the large coastal urban center, endowed with open doors to the sea, and a region with significant agricultural potential, especially in terms of the production of extremely high-quality fortified wines, known by the world-famous label Port. The development of Porto was also closely connected with the left margin of River Douro in Vila Nova de Gaia, where is located the amphitheater-shaped slope with the port wine cellars. In a study concerning competitiveness of the 18 Portuguese district capitals, Porto was the worst ranked. The study was made by Minho University economics researchers and was published in Publico newspaper on 30 September 2006. The best-ranked cities in the study were Évora, Lisbon and Coimbra. Nevertheless, the validity of this study was questioned by some Portas notable figures who argued that the city proper does not function independently but in conurbation with other municipalities. A new ranking published in the newspaper Expresso in 2007, which can be translated to "the best cities to live in Portugal," ranked Porto in third place below Guimarães and Lisbon. The two studies are not directly comparable as they use different dependent measures. The Porto metropolitan area had a GDP amounting to $43 billion and $21,674 per capita.